It's dawn on a gray November morning in 1394, and you're crouched on the deck of a stolen cog somewhere off the coast of Gotland. The Baltic wind cuts through your soaked wool tunic like a blade. You haven't slept in 2 days. Your hands are cracked and bleeding from hauling frozen rope. The ship reeks of bilge water, rat droppings, and the rotting remains of last week's salt herring. Somewhere below deck, 40 other men are pressed together in a space built for cargo, not people. You are a victual brother, a privateer turned pirate, and this is your life now. It's nothing like what Hollywood sold you. Today we're going deep into what daily existence was actually like for pirates during the medieval period, roughly from the 11th century to the 14th century. Forget the tricorn hats, forget the Caribbean, forget Captain Jack Sparrow. We're talking about the real pirates of the Middle Ages, men who operated in the freezing waters of the English Channel, the North Sea, the Baltic, and the Edo Mediterranean. Men who were sometimes merchants, sometimes hired naval mercenaries, and sometimes outright criminals, often all three at once. And I'm warning you now, this is going to destroy any fantasy you have about the romance of medieval piracy. We're talking rotten food, lethal disease, execution by beheading, and a career where you could go from government employee to outlaw with a single change of political allegiance. Let's start with who these people actually were, because a medieval pirate was not a full-time outlaw in a skull and crossbones costume. The reality was far stranger. In the medieval world, the line between pirate and legitimate sailor barely existed. Almost all pirates were also merchants. They made their living through a mixture of honest trade and opportunistic raiding. This was especially true in Northern Europe, where the only people who could afford seagoing vessels were already wealthy: local landowners, merchants, and minor nobles with powerful connections. If they got caught, they could bribe officials. If they operated across borders, pursuing them diplomatically was nearly impossible. A pirate from Flanders who robbed an English ship answered to a different king. Good luck getting justice. Governments made it even more complicated by actively hiring pirates. When medieval kingdoms needed naval power, they didn't have standing navies. They recruited merchant captains, gave them permission to attack enemy ships, and let them keep a share of whatever they seized. This system of licensed raiding, formalized through documents called Letters of Marque, first appeared in England around 1243, when King Henry III began issuing licenses for individuals to seize enemy cargo at sea in exchange for splitting the proceeds with the crown. A man with such a letter was a privateer, a legal pirate. Without one, he was a criminal who could be hanged. The difference between the two was often nothing more than a piece of paper and, sometimes not even that. Take Eustace the Monk, perhaps the most famous pirate of the medieval period. Born around 1170 near Boulogne, Eustace was the younger son of a minor lord. He entered a Benedictine monastery, left after about a year, served as a legal official for the Count of Boulogne, then had a falling out with the Count around 1204 and was declared an outlaw. He turned to piracy in the English Channel, raiding ships for his own profit and hiring himself out as a naval mercenary to whoever would pay. From 1205 to 1212, King John of England employed Eustace and gave him command of a fleet of around 30 ships. He raided the Normandy coastline and seized islands in the Channel, including Sark, using them as bases of operation. He became so feared that parents told their children Eustace would come steal them away in the night if they misbehaved. Contemporary writers said he possessed magical powers and could become invisible. The reality was simply that he knew the tides and currents of the channel better than anyone alive and could appear seemingly out of nowhere. But loyalty meant nothing in this world. When Eustace's old enemy, the Count of Boulogne, allied himself with King John in 1212, Eustace switched sides to serve France instead. He led a French raid against the English town of Folkestone that same year. In 1217, while ferrying reinforcements for a French invasion of England, his fleet was intercepted by English ships at the Battle of Sandwich. The English blinded his crew by throwing powdered quicklime into their faces, then boarded the ships in the chaos. Eustace was found hiding in the bilges of his own flagship. He offered enormous sums of money for his life. His captors refused. He'd made too many enemies on both sides of the channel. They dragged him out and beheaded him on the deck of his own ship. That was how a medieval pirate's career ended, not with buried treasure and a sunset, but with your head on a block while the men you once fought beside watched. Now let's talk about what life was actually like on these ships. Because the vessels medieval pirates operated were nothing like the grand galleons of later centuries. The dominant ship type in northern European waters from the 1200s onward was the cog, a bulky, clinker-built merchant vessel made primarily of oak. A typical cog was 15 to 25 meters long, carried a single mast with a single square sail, and had a cargo capacity of roughly 30 to 200 tons. These were workhorses built for carrying goods, not for speed or agility. They could only sail effectively with the wind behind them. If the wind died, you sat and waited. If the wind turned against you, you could be stuck for days. Crossing the English Channel in good conditions took less than a day. In bad weather, it could take over 2 weeks. Below deck was where the crew lived, and the conditions were appalling. The hull space was designed for cargo, not human comfort. There were no cabins for ordinary crew. Men slept on the wooden deck or wedged between crates and barrels. The bilge, the lowest part of the hull, constantly filled with a foul mixture of seawater, food scraps, human waste, and rat droppings. Without efficient pumps, this putrid water sloshed around beneath the crew's feet, breeding disease. There was a latrine at the bow of the ship, basically a plank with a hole over the open sea, which was dangerous to use in rough weather. In storms, the ship would pitch so violently that chamber pots overturned, coating everything below deck in their contents. In summer, the heat below deck was suffocating. In winter, the cold was deadly. Rats were everywhere, gnawing through rope and food stores alike. Food at sea was a grim business. Fresh provisions lasted only a few days. After that, you ate salt-preserved meat, usually pork or beef, so heavily salted it had to be soaked for hours before it was edible. You ate dried fish, beans, and the infamous ship's biscuit, a rock-hard cracker made from flour and water that could last for months, but often became infested with weevils and maggots. Some ships had a brick-built cooking hearth in the hold, a fire pit balanced on bricks above the wet ballast, which was about as appetizing as it sounds. Fresh water stored in wooden casks went stale and putrid within weeks. Sailors drank ale instead because it was safer than the water. Scurvy, dysentery, and infections from minor wounds were constant threats. Medieval ships had no doctors. If you were cut during a fight or crushed by a falling spar, your crewmates might pour ale on the wound and bind it with whatever cloth was available. Anything more serious, a broken limb, a deep stab wound, could easily kill you. And there was no escape from each other. 40 or 50 men packed into a space the size of a modest house, reeking of sweat and salt, and worse, with nothing to do between raids but repair sails, splice rope, and argue. Drunkenness and fighting were constant problems. Medieval sea law prescribed brutal punishments. A murderer would be tied to his victim's corpse and thrown overboard. Men guilty of causing disorder were bound and dunked in the sea 3 times, with a real chance of drowning. Now, if conditions were this awful, why did anyone choose this life? The answer is the same one that echoes across 8 centuries of human desperation: money and the lack of alternatives. Many medieval pirates were simply poor men with no other options. Coastal communities in Flanders, Friesland, northern Germany, and the English coast produced surplus young men with seamanship skills, but no land and no prospects. Piracy offered the possibility, however slim, of a dramatic change in fortune. One good raid on a wealthy merchant vessel could yield more money than years of honest labor. Others were drawn in by circumstance. The Victual brothers are a perfect example. In 1392, the Dukes of Mecklenburg hired a group of around 1,500 German seamen to break a Danish blockade of Stockholm during a war between Sweden and Denmark. Their original mission was to deliver provisions to the besieged city. Their name comes from the Latin victualia, meaning provisions. But once the war was settled, these men had ships, weapons, fighting experience, and no employment, so they kept raiding. By 1394, the Victual brothers had seized the island of Gotland in the Baltic and set up their headquarters in the town of Visby. From there, they attacked shipping so effectively that maritime trade in the Baltic virtually collapsed. The herring industry was devastated. Queen Margaret of Denmark was so desperate, she asked King Richard II of England to lend her ships to fight the pirates. It took a massive military operation to dislodge them. In 1398, the Teutonic Knights assembled an invasion fleet of 84 ships carrying roughly 4,000 soldiers and attacked Gotland. Most of the pirates were killed, but those who survived simply relocated. They sailed to the North Sea, found shelter along the Frisian coast, and kept raiding. They renamed themselves the Like Dealers, meaning equal sharers, because they divided their plunder evenly among the crew and shared portions with the poor coastal communities that sheltered them. Their most famous captain was Klaus Störtebeker, whose nickname meant he could drain a 4-liter mug of beer in a single gulp. Störtebeker operated from a stronghold in East Frisia and terrorized Hanseatic shipping across both the North and Baltic seas. Around 1400, a Hamburg fleet finally captured him. He and roughly 30 of his crew were beheaded in Hamburg. Legend says he bargained for the lives of any crewmates he could walk past after his own beheading, and that his headless body staggered past several men before an executioner tripped it. The story is almost certainly myth, but the execution was real, and it illustrates the stakes of medieval piracy. If you were caught, there was no trial by jury. There was no appeal. Piracy under Roman legal tradition, which medieval European kingdoms followed, was a capital crime. You were killed, and often your body was left on public display as a warning. The Mediterranean told a different story, but an equally violent one. While northern pirates sailed cogs through gray, freezing seas, Mediterranean pirates operated faster, lighter vessels. Galleys powered by oars as well as sails, giving them the ability to maneuver regardless of wind conditions. And the political landscape was even more tangled. Genoa, Venice, Pisa, Aragon, the Byzantine Empire, and Muslim North African states all competed for control of Mediterranean trade routes. Piracy was woven into the fabric of this competition. Venice created the official position of Captain of the Gulf, whose job was essentially to patrol the Adriatic and seize enemy ships. State-sponsored piracy under a different name. Genoa was so notorious for producing pirates that the Byzantine Emperor Isaac II formally complained to the Genoese government in 1192 that their pirates had robbed his ships and demanded restitution. It had no effect. According to the historian Jacques Ayres, in 15th century Genoa, piracy was an industry. Fishermen, young sailors, merchants, all participated. Even the Doge Archbishop of Genoa, Paolo Fregoso, personally captained corsair raids. And then there were the Barbary corsairs of North Africa, Muslim raiders who had been attacking Christian shipping since at least the 700s. By 1198, the threat was severe enough that the Catholic Church founded a monastic order, the Trinitarians, specifically to ransom Christians enslaved by pirates. In 1390, a combined French and Genoese fleet launched a Barbary crusade against the pirate port of Mahdia in modern Tunisia. The cycle of raiding, retaliation, and counter-raiding between Christian and Muslim pirates defined Mediterranean life for centuries. Despite all of this, the violence, the squalor, the constant threat of death, medieval piracy was genuinely transformative. Pirates shaped trade routes, toppled political alliances, and forced nations to develop naval capacity. The Hanseatic League's strict convoy system and its requirement that large ships carry 20 armed men emerged directly as a response to piracy. Cambridge scholars scattered and fled because of town violence, but piracy on the seas disrupted entire economies and forced queens to beg foreign kings for ships. The earliest letters of marque laid the groundwork for international maritime law. The conflicts between pirates and states forced European powers to define what was legal at sea and what wasn't. Distinctions that still matter today. The Victual Brothers' egalitarian system of sharing plunder equally among crew members anticipated the democratic practices that would later define the more famous pirates of the Caribbean Golden Age, 300 years later. Medieval pirates lived brutal, short, desperate lives. They ate rotten food on stinking ships in freezing seas. They killed and were killed over barrels of herring and bolts of cloth. They switched allegiances with the tides and were betrayed just as quickly in return. Most died young, from disease, from drowning, from a sword in the gut, or from an executioner's axe. But they were also part of something larger than themselves. They were the dark mirror of medieval commerce, the price Europe paid for its expanding trade networks. Every merchant ship that sailed meant a target for someone willing to take it. And in a world where kings had no navies and the law ended at the waterline, the men who lived by violence on the open sea shaped the medieval world, just as surely as the kings and bishops who condemned them from dry land. If you enjoyed this deep dive into what life was really like for a medieval pirate, hit that like button and subscribe for more from the Medieval Worker. What other medieval occupations do you want to see covered? Let me know in the comments. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.